Okay, so the intro sucked, but like I put too much effort into it to just delete it, so I just kept it in. Godzilla. I know him, you know him, and if you don't know him, you're probably only visible through ultrasound. I mean, everybody at least has heard of Godzilla. When somebody mentions the word Godzilla, everybody's thinking of the same lizard that destroys Tokyo, blah 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 blah, you know the drill. Anyways, this franchise got a lot of attention in recent times because we Godzilla fans were living in heaven. Basically, in November, the series Monarch Legacy of Monster released. Then in December, we got Godzilla Minus One, a Japanese production. And then in April or March for some countries, we got Godzilla Kong, which I thought was pretty fun. Yeah, I didn't think Monarch Legacy of Monsters and Godzilla Kong were perfect, not even close, but I still really enjoyed them in the end. And yeah, we were living in a pretty good time, until we had to face reality afterwards. Out of these recent Godzilla projects, Godzilla Minus One was the one which received the biggest amount of attention. The movie marks the 37th entry in the Godzilla franchise, and with that also the 33rd entry if you only include the Japanese movies, which are produced by Toho. It did release in Japanese theaters on the 3rd of November, but it got a release in a lot of countries on the 1st December of that same year. And the movie instantly received a lot of attention by movie critics, cinephiles, and also casual viewers just for how good it was. And to be honest, as a lifelong Godzilla fan, I absolutely stand by that statement. I've seen plenty of people who are not Godzilla fans at all, and they praised the movie as one of the best movies of 2023, and some even as the best one. And honestly, I am so glad that a beautiful movie like this one is showing people what beautiful stories the Godzilla franchise can contain. Because while indeed there are plenty of Godzilla movies with great stories, like GMK, the original from 1954, Shin Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Destroyer, Godzilla vs. Biollante, Godzilla vs. Mothra, and I mean, I could go on forever. These movies, however, did not seem to get as much attention as Godzilla Minus One. The movie even went as far as winning the Oscar for Best Visual Effects, and with that being the first movie in the full franchise to win an Academy Award, and that makes me incredibly happy. Amongst the Godzilla community, I've seen the movie generally being nominated as the second best movie in the franchise, right after the original from 1954. For me personally, it's an extremely difficult choice. They're both amongst my favorite movies and they're both perfect in my opinion. But I think I've generally decided that Minus One, for me personally, slightly takes the edge as best Godzilla movie, or at least my personal favorite. And as time will pass, I'm sure I will love the movie even more, because it was my first Japanese Godzilla movie that I've seen in theaters, and I'm sure over time a more personal connection to the movie will grow.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
And yeah, my favorite part of the movie is the story. I mean, yes, don't get me wrong, there is still plenty of jaw-dropping and insanely memorable Godzilla action, which is designed in fantastic visual effects and also paired with an insane sound and score, especially that score. I mean, that was a tremendous soundtrack. But the story in this movie is just so beautiful that I think it outperforms everything else in the movie, even though the rest, as I said, I still think is perfect. Anyways, today we're going to be analyzing that story. First, let's get some disclaimers behind us. My voice sucks. My throat is literally fucking dying inside, like I am already dead inside, and it's just so fucking painful. I have tried literally doing anything, which means I have tried exactly doing nothing, but like it just can't get away. So yeah, my voice sounds weird, just so you know, it's because my throat is dying. And the other thing is that yes, this video will contain spoilers, so I would recommend you to watch the movie first and then come back to this video. But yeah, go watch it immediately because it's a fantastic movie and it's absolutely worth your time. And now I think I can say that without any further ado, we can jump right into the video. Now, the movie takes place from 1945 to 1947, right after the Second World War, and already the title of the movie is related to these tragic events. After the war, Japan was in great economic troubles, and that because of the air raids and the atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Metaphorically, we could think that Japan at the time was at ground zero. However, in this alternate timeline, Godzilla shows up, destroys Tokyo again, and with that knocks Japan down even further than zero, hence the title Minus One. Now, the movie starts off with our main character, who is a kamikaze pilot, landing on the fictional island known as Odo. The island is full of mechanics who repair damaged kamikaze planes, and since the main character Koichi Shikishima, I probably butchered that, I'm not Japanese, stop judging me, he neither supports the reasons why his government is fighting, and he also simply doesn't want to die. So he decides to chicken out and pretend his plane was damaged. Now, we will surely take a more precise look at this full kamikaze aspect later in the video, but for now, the important part is that a pre-mutated form of Godzilla shows up and basically decimates everyone on Odo. Already here, the attack can be thought of as the representation of the Pearl Harbor attack. One of the mechanics in fear shoots at Godzilla just like Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The attacking side was expecting submission by the opponent, yet it ended up resulting in an absolute massacre. Godzilla and Odo ends up killing almost everybody, and that represents the nuclear bomb droppings on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The movie criticizes Japan for the stupid and pretty much nonsensical attack on Pearl Harbor, which just like expected didn't majorly damage the US or Godzilla if you're thinking about the movie. Yet while the movie acknowledges that the intentions of the USA were to end the war, the movie criticizes the cynical method that was used to try to accomplish that goal, because even with the best intentions, dropping the most powerful and deadly weapon ever created in the long history of cruel mankind on innocent civilians who had all little and basically also no influence on what the government decided just can't be forgiven. Later in the movie, the atomic bomb testings are shown, and it is also shown that during the tests, Godzilla got hit by the blast of the bomb, and that is what actually mutated him and ended up making him the Godzilla we know. However, when Godzilla attacks Japan, the US decides not to help to defeat Godzilla and rather decides to stay away from the situation to prevent any kind of intervention from the Soviet Union. It kind of shows how the US played God when creating the nuclear bomb, yet backed away when having to face the consequences. And these consequences would be that we would be living in a new age of humanity. Godzilla in general can not just be seen as an incarnation of the atomic bomb, but also more specifically as a representation of American attacks on Japan during the war, and that is made clear when it is stated that Godzilla has chosen the region around Tokyo as his territory. Godzilla is the embodiment of the cold-blooded and inconsistent attacks by the US towards Japan. However, amongst the criticism towards the US government, the movie also acknowledges the mistakes that the Japanese government did during the Second World War. The movie very well knows how cruel the government was towards their soldiers and their citizens. The main character is a kamikaze pilot who doesn't support the ideas of the government he is fighting for and also simply doesn't want to die. However, the Japanese government masked these suicide missions as honoring missions, stating that it would be better to die fighting and honoring your family and country rather than dying without fighting. Yet the twist is that the government brainwashed these soldiers into thinking that the kamikaze missions were acts of honor because the government just barely cared about their soldiers. Japan's government was so frustrated by the idea of losing a war that they would rather choose to sacrifice their own soldiers and people rather than give up. Now, while the idea of fighting until the last breath might sound epic and also kind of romantic, it is obvious that that just leads to unnecessary deaths and losses. In the end, trying to justify acts of forced suicide for the abstract concepts of national pride and honor is inhumane, and the movie clearly blames the government and tells us that these suicide missions were not just a betrayal of the own people, they were also a betrayal of humanity itself. And I think that the characters in this movie can take this aspect of the story and the message behind it even further. Now, our protagonist Koichi Shikishima pretends to have an issue with his kamikaze plane and lands on the island Odo so the mechanics can check on his plane. However, it turns out that the plane isn't really damaged, and that is one thing that instantly makes the lead mechanic Sasaku Tachibana suspicious. He is already suspecting that Koichi just pretended to be flying a damaged plane. Later, Godzilla shows up and Shikishima is ordered to shoot at Godzilla with the machine guns attached to his plane. yet once again, he is too scared and fails to shoot at Godzilla, resulting in Tachibana and Shikishima being the only survivors of Godzilla's attack. Tachibana, who is brainwashed by the government, instantly projects all his anger onto Shikishima and blames him for causing the death of the soldiers. Tachibana even hands Shikishima pictures of the soldiers with their family to further cause Shikishima's grief. When Shikishima returns home, he learns that his parents tragically died during the air raids on Tokyo. There, he also meets Sumiko, a neighbor who tells him that her kids died too. Yet after she realizes that Shikishima was supposed to be a kamikaze pilot, instead of helping Shikishima and taking him into her comfort, also Sumiko projects her anger onto him. Newsflash, the government fed the civilians the same lies about national pride and honor that were fed to the soldiers. And this is already the beginning of our character arc. Shikishima also meets another character, Noriko, another orphan of the war, who is about the same age as he is. She has a child called Akiko with her, whose parents died during the bombings. Long story short, the two end up living together over the span of 2 years, and during this time Shikishima got a job, where he has to destroy the mines in the sea that were left over from the war. The crew he meets perfectly resembles fantastic people who were broken by the war. For example, Kenji Noda, a brilliant scientific mind whose potential got wasted for developing weapons and other military objects. We also have Seiichi Akitsu, a war veteran who loves his country yet has a hatred for its government and has surrendered by thinking that the government will never change. All these characters perfectly represent the veterans' post-war experiences and how they all had lost faith in their country. However, beautifully enough, they still decide to take matters into their own hands and develop a plan to defeat Godzilla. They invite plenty of war veterans to join them in the fight, since no government was willing to fight the beast. Kenji Noda, who we have already mentioned, is the one who actually develops the plan, yet during the presentation of the plan to all the veterans, he fully acknowledges that he can't force them to participate, and he obviously doesn't want to force them either. Since he can't guarantee that they all will survive, he tells them that they can leave and not participate, and some actually do leave, but when somebody asks if it is sure that they will die, and Kenji Noda says that that is of course wrong, one man even jokes and says that it is more of a chance than they were given during the war. The timing of the joke, yet also the thematic behind it, is perfect. However, another character which I think works perfectly is Noriko, basically Koichi's semi-wife. Koichi clearly has feelings for her, but after having failed to fulfill duty as a kamikaze pilot and then also failing to save the soldiers on Odo from Godzilla, he feels like he shouldn't live, especially when even the average citizen blames him for it. Akiko, the child which they are raising, and Noriko represent the life Koichi always wanted, yet was made to believe by government lies that he doesn't deserve. So Koichi acts by pushing them back, for example not opening up to Noriko for most part of the movie, or also correcting Akiko when she calls him dad. He clearly wants to live with them, but he isn't ready to appreciate it. When Koichi finally opens up to Noriko, it is in my opinion one of the best moments in the entire movie, even without having Godzilla. The sheer emotions in this scene are incredible, and when Godzilla shows up in Ginza and proceeds to destroy the city and kill Noriko, Koichi is filled with hatred and guilt. He is ready to do everything to end his personal inner war and wants to die to kill Godzilla. He even does everything to have Tachibana as the mechanic to repair his plane, because he wants Tachibana, who was the one to blame him this whole time, to see how he, Koichi, fulfills his duty. During the final battle, when there is a moment of silence before Koichi flies his plane towards Godzilla's mouth and kills Godzilla, is perfect. There is the tension because we think Koichi has died, yet the genius of this movie is to not kill off Koichi. It turns out that Tachibana had realized over time how unfair his judgments towards Shikishima were, and he had built in an ejector seat so Shikishima could save himself. The moment where Tachibana is relieved after finding out that Shikishima saved himself and he starts crying will always make me tear up. Also, Sumiko didn't like how Koichi failed his job, yet she starts to become more and more kind of a part of the family and pretty much babysits Akiko. While both Sumiko and Tachibana weren't major characters in the story, they still are fundamental characters for the movie to explain its message. It explains how the people of Japan over time started to free themselves from the government lies, and that is yet another beautiful part of the movie. All of this makes Godzilla Minus One a majestic movie, and also the ending where Koichi ends up finding out that Noriko survived will always make me cry. It is just beautiful. So, summarizing, Godzilla Minus One is a Japanese Godzilla movie full of splendid Godzilla action, yet the movie isn't just that. The movie delivers an intense critique of the horrors of the Second World War and the governments during that war. It also shows how we as people can shape society and save our future if we take matters into our own hands, and that it isn't the governments who do that. We can also extract more personal messages from the movie, like the fact that we do deserve to be forgiven for our wrongdoings, and that it is possible for us to escape our grief and shape our own destinies. But most importantly, that we were given a short period to experience life, and that we shouldn't throw our life away in any situation. Sure, it is a Godzilla movie, and don't get me wrong, you still got plenty of Godzilla action, but the next time you'll watch the movie, think about how it is more than just a Godzilla movie, because this movie is a tribute to life.